When it comes to looking after our mental and emotional well-being, I think we're all privy to the fantasy that out there is some instantaneous quick fix guaranteed once off solution that we can apply, and that going forward all would be forever well. And unfortunately that is very seldom the case when it comes to taking responsibility for your mental, emotional and spiritual health as well as your physical health. It is important to understand that there is accountability required. There is commitment, diligence, awareness, and a willingness to make some choices that may not necessarily feel like the easiest ones to make. However, that being said, there are some key skills with which we can equip ourselves with, which can greatly enhance our life experience. However, these skills aren't all that glamorous. They can be a little bit tedious at times, and they require repetition and practice. And consequently, we often discard them, assuming because we don't get that quick fix that we're all looking for, we discard them without giving them a chance to actually take effect. The first skill is emotional resilience. This is the capacity to work with your emotions. And when it comes to our emotions, we tend to fall on either end of the spectrum. We have a tendency to wallow in our emotions and become overwhelmed by them, or we have a tendency to try and suppress them, to ignore them, to avoid dealing with them. And I suppose it's about finding a middle ground. It's about being able to identify what you are feeling somatically, because again, we experience our emotions in our body, not in our mind, as we sometimes assume. Being able to decipher the message that our emotion is giving us, being able to tolerate the sensations that are accompanying the emotion, but being able to then challenge some of the stories that come about as a result of the emotion, challenge some of the beliefs that it may be bringing up for us, or the thought patterns that it may be resulting in. So we can care for our emotion and we can give it attention without being completely overwhelmed by it or without being controlled by it. Second skill is cognitive reappraisal, and this is basically just a capacity to be able to observe your own thoughts and to create an awareness of some of your cognitive biases, some of your self-limiting beliefs, some of the narratives that just no longer work for you, to create an awareness and a capacity to listen to your inner critic, to understand some of the narratives and beliefs that you hold about yourself, that you hold about other people, some of your expectations, some of your assumptions, some of your predictions about how things should be. Because again, our world is very much a construct of what it is that we believe. And the more that we're able to recognize that what we believe isn't always either accurate nor helpful, the more likely we are to be able to construct something that is more benevolent and more meaningful. Third skill is being able to fully ascertain the values that you want to stand for, that you want your life to reflect, and to be able to take small, meaningful steps towards those values in the decisions that you make, in the choices that you make, in the way that you behave throughout your day. And we need to be very careful about what we assume is going to make our life feel fulfilling. I mean, we tend to focus on extrinsic goals, extrinsic achievements, acquisition, aesthetics, and generally that gives us a very short-term satisfaction. It doesn't really lead to long-term fulfillment. So very quickly we find ourselves feeling empty again. Whereas when we focus on the values that we want ourselves to be represented by, such as kindness and integrity and loyalty and honesty, and try to live in accordance with those values, we find a way to focus on contribution as opposed to being very egocentric and thinking about ourselves and how the world affects us all of the time. We turn it around and we start thinking about how we affect the world and what we do for others. And this can be a real changing point in people's appreciation of their life. The next skill that is possibly not a skill but is something I always like to talk about is basically the capacity to act your way into thinking differently. I mean, oftentimes I certainly over intellectualize things and I get bogged down in trying to justify whether something is right or wrong. And ultimately, once we have decided that something is in alignment with our values, sometimes we need to just act. And frequently in life, even though we feel like doing one thing, we need to do another. I mean, yesterday I was in college all day, and the last thing I wanted was to entertain my little 2 year old, almost three, for 2 hours. And I was just like, oh, we just stick on Fireman Sam and it'll be grand. And then I thought, even though I'm tired, he deserves my time. So I packed him up in the car and we went to the shopping centre and we went to look at all the Halloween decorations and the Christmas decorations. I got some valuable time with him. I actually ended up feeling very vitalised, very re-energized by the whole experience, and he enjoyed it. And it was basically me stepping outside of my comfort zone and my desires and thinking about him as opposed to thinking about myself. Now, I don't always manage to achieve this, but oftentimes when we do the thing that we least want to do or that we least feel like doing, it actually works out to everybody's benefit. Now, it's recognizing that a lot of these skills take a significant amount of practice. So don't assume that you're just going to be able to apply them all immediately. Also recognize that oftentimes we are very, very attached to unhelpful thinking patterns, to old ways of believing about ourselves, old ways of thinking about the world, and to behaviors. And in order for us to change, we need to treat ourselves with compassion and understanding. So it's little steps taken consistently, not trying to overwhelm yourself, but understanding that the little steps and the little choices that you make on a daily basis all add up and all have significance to your overall well-being. So it's about just being a little bit objective. And one avenue I have found which is so beneficial to becoming more self-aware is having a contemplative practice. And again, people tend to have assumptions about meditation and mindfulness. They reckon it should be maybe a panacea that is going to make them feel immediately better. And oftentimes that isn't the case. I mean, what meditation and mindfulness is designed to do is to allow you to observe your internal experience, to recognize your emotions, to recognize all of the noisy traffic you have going on in your mind, and to be able to drop into the body, to be able to stand back and recognize that you are not your thoughts, you are not your emotions. They are just transient things that are going on that you do not have to believe, but that you have to recognize in order to be able to work with them and in order to be able to steer yourself in, I suppose, a value aligned direction. So it's about recognizing also that meditation doesn't necessarily have to be this very prolonged practice, because meditation can be so tedious. It can be really boring and really frustrating initially when you try to get into an accustomed way of sitting with your own experience with no distraction. So it's about starting off very small. I mean, I would start most clients off with a minute at the most, just sitting with yourself in silence, observing what's going on. If these skills feel like they would be something that you think you could apply in your own life and you would like to develop them a little bit further or get more information, get in touch with me on my website. It's fundamentals.ie.